So what I want to do is, of course, in a very condensed way, and hopefully you will have the chance to read the chapter, but also maybe, if I may dare to say, the books will give you a more, I think, sophisticated analysis of this topic. So what I want to discuss is the articulation of memory, genocide, images, and diaspora. Those are the 4 keywords for my talk today, and particularly to analyze it from the perspective of Armenian diasporic contemporary artists, and how they touch upon this difficult, but of course, necessity of representing the Armenian genocide. And today I'm going to present you a shorter version of the chapter by mainly concentrating on one artist, not Egoyan, because I think it's clear and is also the most known for most of you, but another younger artist, Marie-Aude Baronian. Before that, a quick note on the works of the 3 visual artists actually mainly concentrate on, so Egoyan, but also Garine Torosian, who's also a Canadian Armenian, but more known in the experimental film scene, and as Garabedian. So each of them translate the desire to transmit and connect the past to tangible materials in the here and now. Rather, and I insist on that, replicating evidentiary documents that support a culture marked by genocidal past. They interrogate the relationship of memory and images and not merely represent graphically the genocide, something that Lisa has just talked about. I have argued that Armenians, especially in Western diaspora, continuously feel the need to accommodate visual evidence in order to validate their inherited historical past. This explains, by the way, why we speak of a transgenerational trauma. The very status of images and their publicity is at stake in the Armenian case because there are at least few filmic images of the genocide history, and because the available images are not circulated smoothly in the public visual sphere. I have also argued that the Armenian genocide is not only seen as a non-event from a denial perspective, but also as a kind of non-document, ontologically speaking, of course, as it remains largely unrecorded and unrepresented. Egoyan, Torosian, and Garabedian do not really aim at filling for good that gap by spreading images in the public space. Rather, the relevance of their work today in 2015 is that they question and reflect upon this very invisibility. They provide us with what I've called imaginary archives, that's to say, documents that do not replicate the historical factuality in its wholeness, but that translate the need to anchor that past and to imagine it. They develop distinctive filmic strategies, be them highly artificial, in order to recall the Armenian legacy and to question its imposing nature without, again, duplicating its factuality. They are interested in the process of making images and responding to images. In other words, their work is animated by a sort of messianic, though implicit desire to touch upon the void of history by creating and constructing alternative and thus imaginary archives. So now I want to turn to Marie-Aude Baronian. So again, a less popular artist than Egoyan, but well established. So Baronian is a Belgian-Armenian artist born in Syria in 1977, who lived as a young child in Lebanon. His work is qualified as multimedial, multi-referential, but altogether very consistent. His references are indeed multiple: cinema, literature, graphic arts, music, and so on. While his work is not exclusively focusing on Armenian-related elements, I will present today, very briefly, of course, some of his work that specifically take over and deconstruct some of the Armenian codes and cultural signs. Garabedian, by the way, like Egoyan and Torosian, investigate the multi-layers ways to capture the experience of fracture, be it collective or personal. Garabedian's work is worthy of our attention due to its plastic qualities. I really insist on that. It's not just because he's an Armenian working on that issue. So because of the singularity of his oeuvre. In short, he works with and through his Armenian identity without thereby restricting his practice to an ethnographic, nationalist, or ethnocentric quest. In some of the works he made between 2005 and 2010, memory and visual media interconnect and are questioned from various perspectives. And for today, I decided not to show some of the video works, so no moving images, only still images. Again, so I think today it's the third time we speak about this image, but there is a slight difference. I hope you can see it. In the artist and his model, replica Gorky 2010, by the way, also after Egoyan working on this, and we should also mention that he also made a short film in 1995 already on Gorky, and Dornsife who also pay homage to Gorky. So here also Garabedian gives his own interpretation and configuration of the significance of the painter in his own practice. In this work, he reproduced Gorky's famous painting and reworked it by replacing, with a sense of irony, we could say, the faces with those of his own and his own mother. Arshil Gorky, I think it's clear today, serves as a major entry point into the appropriation of the genocide. The painting by Garabedian refers, as we know now, to Gorky's self-portrait, which was based on a photograph. Garabedian's act of appropriation, or perhaps we should say identification, clearly underscores how many Armenians constantly use this painting as an emblem of the genocide survivor. It translates the need for iconic references to legitimate historical silence. The work you see now is entitled Fig a Akom Alphabet, mainly calligraphic, evokes the learning process of properly writing the Armenian alphabet and the way it is practiced by pupils who write letters over and over again in their copybooks. Obviously a typical mnemonic device. It exposed both the cultural memory of the Armenian alphabet as well as the functioning of memory, the literal functioning of memory. Garabedian has extended this repetitive device, so typical for writing, into various artistic forms by repeating the same technique in diverse formats and materials, so pencil on paper, marker on the wall, to write over and over again in order to master this alphabet, obviously, but also to inscribe over and over again for preserving the continuity and persistence of this cultural index. In this version, which is a carpet version, two central and significant landmarks are condensed, the Armenian alphabet and Oriental carpets. Everything that is concerned with letters in a broad sense is at stake in Garabedian's entire oeuvre. Alphabet, but also poetry, literature, citation, books, language, etc. This work is entitled Untitled, Daniel Varoujan, Ghent, 2011. And it perfectly conjugates the question of quotations, reference, and of the historical blank. This installation refers as an homage to the conceptual and minimal work of American Cuban artist Felix Gonzalez Torres. In particular, Torres being known for his stacks and accumulation of paper. Garabedian's Untitled is a high pile of blank poster on which are inscribed in white on white, but in relief, certain words in the Armenian alphabet, coming from verses from Armenian poet Daniel Varoujan, who was, as some of you may know, assassinated on the night of April 24. With this artwork, Garabedian is touching on unknown pages of history. Varoujan was, by the way, probably not very known for non-Armenians, but what is probably even less known is that he studied in Ghent, so in a city in Belgium, from 1906 to 1909. So Untitled crystallizes the cultural origin and the catastrophe legacy of the artist, as well as the here and now, Ghent, so the place where Garabedian actually lives and works. The words on the poster are obviously incomprehensible for the visitors or viewers. And so the picture I just showed you, that was in a museum, actually. Even if the viewers could take a poster of the exhibition along and thus take a part in this misunderstood and incomprehensible history in order to appropriate it freely. Doing so, the viewer simultaneously participates in the dissemination or the circulation and distribution of the work, but also in its disappearance. In the same way that posters function as souvenirs of exhibition we have seen, Untitled can only exist as an image, a monochrome image, because almost imperceptible, white on white, that articulates and substantiates loss and silence. It is not the words, the letters, or the meanings that strike us, but rather the motif as an image in the sense of a virtual, spectral, or displaced presence. The experience of disorientation, of withdrawal and exclusion that compose this work replicate not only the fate of the Armenians, but also of the spectator-visitor. There is always, in Garabinian art practice, an echo between what is proper to the catastrophe and what is proper to the work of art. Garabinian often uses domestic objects charged with biographic significance. In particular, he uses objects that are at once very concrete and spectral, material and spiritual, because of the diasporic context in which they operate. Garabin has made many words that we could qualify as diasporic in the sense that it displays objects or figures that constitute hallmarks or emblems of the Armenian communities worldwide. The artist uses, mobilizes, and stages typically Armenian cultural object and motif in a nuanced and often agitating way in order to punctuate and to interrogate the historical and emotional value of the object and by extension of what constitutes an artwork in the first place. Accordingly, some of his installations display this typical object souvenir. For instance, here in the work gift t-shirt, so a round t-shirt, obviously a souvenir t-shirt, but also these work calendars, which is a collection of calendars with characteristic pictures of the cultural and national heritage, such so you can see on those calendars churches, landscape, monuments, alphabet, Mount Ararat, of course, and so on. And there is also this work, which is very meaningful, so a sculpture in neon that very clearly displays the picture of Mount Ararat. And a last one I want to show you is Where is Mush, Where is Van, is another meaningful piece, since it is a collection of geographical documents and historical maps. Indeed, Mush and Van are the regions where his grandparents came from, but also, as most Armenians know, the places that symbolize collective memory, as they are places of persecution and resistance. All these objects and figures are memorial indexes that together offer a portrait of an equally real and artificial Armenia. Archival objects or visual anchors are pivotal for the inscription of both the catastrophic event and the cultural mythology that is somehow promoted and intensified when it is approached from a diasporic angle. And I just want to go to my conclusion. I just have 2 pages left. Garabinian multiplicity of reference to the history of images, history of art, but also, by the way, of cinema. I don't show you that here, which is also the case for Torosian and Egoyan. So this multiplicity of reference is not so much a strategy of citation, but rather the eagerness, if not the obsession, to look for signs and indexes that gather stable and identifiable points of reference. The works by Garabinian, but I should also say Egoyan and Torosian, do not merely maintain or stigmatize a certain stereotypical treatment of images. They rather call them into question. Nonetheless, one might wonder whether it is possible to be entirely detached from the cliché. And I like to play with the double meaning of the word cliché. You know, cliché as we understand, but also cliché means snapshot, which is a typical, so this cliché, a typical within diaspora, of course. Even if we might observe a certain instrumentalization of these images, that is a sort of displacement in context, it is nevertheless always complicated and problematized. What is more, Garabedian art, as I showed you previously, calls for a spectator who is active in the process of image making, of meaning making, a process in which the viewer is scouted in a sort of archaeological manner, or an archaeological work and duty, since he or she participate into the construction of the work. Remembering the Armenian genocide is a displacement in itself, to remember it outside the original and natal locus, and to remember it outside its original historical time. The artist's multiple visual work not only repetitively translate the way that genocide haunts Armenian diaspora, but also allude to the idea that the heritage of the catastrophe can only be imagined. The construction of a memory of the genocide binds surely in the Armenians in diaspora together. And this is expressed by archival desires, refracted in the production and preservation of certain visual lexicons and iconographies. The diasporic condition is defined by a need to anchor and to root the existence of the origin in a certain memorial representation. Garabedian's poster and gesture engage both his displaced biographic self, so being of Armenian descent, and his plastic quest for capturing and chasing images. How does one visually speak about this genocide without having to prove that it actually took place? This is the very challenge for these artists. In my view, the image should not have anything to prove, because such understanding, as Mark Nishinans have also argued, would fall into the perverse logic of self-explanation and justification. Therefore, Garabedian, and I should also say Egoyan and Torosian, succeed in assembling images that simultaneously indicate a certain lack of available images of the catastrophe and respond to the perversity of the archival process by proposing other images that do not function as visual evidence. The majority of the images the artists use or recreate reveal the inversion of destruction into cultural and transcendental depositories, or icons of what survived, the churches and Mount Ararat, obviously. Or in the case of Ararat, for instance, we can say that when images are missing, they must be literally fabricated. In their works, Egoyan, Torosian, and Garabedian recycle or recraft the iconography of genocide, as well as the cultural lexicons, which are reinvented in other highly constructed visual territories. So this will be my last sentence. Images are the necessary detour for remembering a culture that lacks images and that, as a result, has been weaving for generations its own tapestries and textures of memory. Thank you.